Amira Daoudi is a graphic designer and works mostly for the cultural sector. About 10 years ago, Amira started her niche, and now she has designed over more than 200 posters, including film posters for classics, such as the movie Black or Runskop. Amira describes her work as a labor of passion, where beauty forms a motive in the many steps in her journey. Please welcome Amira Daoudi.
So first of all, thank you, Kavis and VIB, excuse me, forgot, for inviting me to reflect on the theme of beauty as a graphic designer. And when I look at the world around us, I can't help but seeing that everything we touch, everything we sit on, everything we stand on, everything we sleep in or we eat has been shaped by designers. And so in our visual landscape, all those designers have a contribution and a responsibility for the beauty of it, or the lack of it. And sometimes it's invisible to the naked eye. But it took a designer to decide on the speed of light when you turn it on, or it took a tactile designer to decide on the sense of a button when you touch it, or it took a graphic designer to decide on how a title appears on the screen. And so all those things are being deeply analyzed and then produced for their functionality or for their economics and for many other things, and also for their beauty at best. And as a graphic designer, beauty is a challenging thing because there's a constant search for a balance between art and commerce. And so the final result must be functional and effective to the client's satisfaction so he can sell his product. But me, I also want the final result to be as beautiful as it could possibly be. And so in the discussion about what is beautiful, we all know the famous quote, "Les goûts et les couleurs ne se discutent pas." Well, in my world, in my graphic design world, les goûts et les couleurs, ça se discute et on fait que ça. I think my passion for graphic design and for cinema started by the age of 13, when I saw a masterpiece from Wong Kar-wai, In the Mood for Love. And the film is set in Shanghai in the 60s, and it tells a growing love affair between two neighbors who are already married. And by the way, if you haven't seen the film, I just saw that Filmfest of Ghent, which starts tonight, is playing a restored version of the film. So check it out. And I remember when I was a kid, I used to cut out all the images I could find in magazines and newspapers about the film and hang it on my bedroom door. So was this maybe the first seeds of a film poster, perhaps? I'm not sure. But one thing I know for sure is that the beauty of the images, the art directions, the costumes, the music really touched me. And at the age of 13, I didn't understand a thing about love or love affairs, yet the story totally overwhelmed me. And so inspired by cinema and by all these visuals, I went to study graphic design at St. Lucas Hogeschool. And as very often happens in life, plans didn't go through, and I left school early to start my own graphic design agency at the age of 23. And I think it's very exciting now to be able to work in the cinema world and in the theater world, and to be in between those two worlds and sharing and being able to connect with the creators through visuals and through beauty. And the process behind making a film poster is totally different than behind making a theater poster. So in film, I always start to work at the end of the process of a film, so in the post-production. So when the movie is already finished, then I start to search for an image based on existing visual materials. And for theater, we often communicate about pieces a year in advance, so the piece doesn't exist yet. So we have to create visual materials starting from scratch. Now, what makes a poster so important? A film poster, for example, it's the first thing that communicates you about the existence of a film. And as a designer, you're kind of the middleman, woman, between the audience and a filmmaker. And Pasolini once said, Il cinema è un'esplosione del mio amore per la realtà. Meaning, cinema is an explosion of my love for reality. So for me, it's very rewarding that my work helps sharing that emotion of beauty. And besides a trailer that you might have seen online, the first thing that the audience sees when they go to the movie theaters is the poster. So it's a first contact. And in that way, I think it's kind of delicate and furtive. And in order to capture the attention of the viewer, you want to invite him to come and see the film, so you need to create a sense of longing. And you want to make people curious. You want them to want to know more about the story. So the poster is supposed to trigger a sense of desire or even seduce you. And as much as a film is meant to narrate, so does a poster. And for me, the aim is not just to put a couple of main actors together. Okay, he's famous and she's famous. We have antagonist, protagonist. We put them together on the setting of the story. Many film posters are made that way. But me, I try not to work that way. I like to keep it a bit more mysterious. And I prefer to make an exercise in finding the right relation between all the key elements of the story, and also with all the possible symbolic languages, and hopefully touch the viewer with the essence of the film. Now, the film industry is doing good. I mean, pre-corona is doing good. And normally each year, almost thousands of films are being released. So there's a broad spectrum of films. And with that, an overload of film posters. So what you want to do with your visual, you want to try and stand out, because the audience doesn't have time to deeply process all that visual information. Now, I made already a lot of posters, so I decided to talk about the very first film poster I did for Little Baby Jesus of Flanders, because I think the philosophy of graphic design that I like is already captured in that image. And as an example of a theater poster, I will talk about one of the latest visuals for KVS, for Pichot's Fire Will Become Ashes, But Not Now. And in your survival kit, you can find a visual. So it's this one. So Little Baby Jesus of Flanders, it's a film that tells a story of three beggars who go singing around on Christmas Eve, and they go begging for money, for food, and for liquor. And they end up getting lost in the woods, and they see a lot of magical scenes, and at some point they witness the birth of Kineke Jezus, Little Baby Jesus. And I always try to create a visual identity that is faithful to the film. And in this case, the movie is black and white, so of course I used black and white. I think the use of another color could be misleading. And my inspiration can come from any form of art. And for this project, I was specifically inspired by Polish film posters from the 70s. And they are usually very simple and quite dark designs. And in average, people only look for 1 second to a poster. So it's really important to catch their attention. And I think the smaller elements you have within an image, the more iconic it gets. And the easier it is to remember what was actually on that image. So here, a little beggar and his star. And even if the character is very small in the poster, we do suggest that there's a greater story behind it. And by isolating the character and leaving a big blank page, at the time when we were making that poster, so more than 10 years ago, we were really also moving against the huge flood of images, and that's how we stood out. And now this style of movie posters and theater poster, I'm very inspired by the master of movie posters from the 60s, Saul Bass. He was an American designer who made many illustrated film posters, and they were like pieces of art. And maybe you know some of them. He made the posters for all Hitchcock's films, for Vertigo, Exodus, Breakfast at Tiffany's, The Shining, and American Psycho, etc. And there was a time where all the film posters used to be paintings and drawings. And even though I wasn't born yet, I think I really miss those analog times. But already then, in the 60s, the struggle between art and commerce started. And the marketing departments of the Hollywood studios gained in power. And beautiful illustrated posters started to be replaced by pictures of famous actors. And nowadays, we live in such a fast pace, and a movie is a very expensive product, so the poster has to work instantly. And so the marketing aspect also often prevails at the expense of the beauty of it. And as a child, I used to be a huge fan of the poster of Jaws. I don't know if you remember that poster. And I remember I was more specifically a fan of the poster than the movie. And I think it's just such an iconic composition with this huge shark in the middle, big triangle, and then the little line with the little swimmer on top of it and the red letters. And just in this composition, you can feel the tension and the danger in the design. And I think it's interesting to see that although in those times we didn't have the same technologies, now it's almost 50 years later and it's still one of the most iconic film posters. And in the creation of theater poster, so I already told you that we have to start a visual from scratch, and that opens a lot of creative possibilities. And it gives also a little bit more freedom, I think, for the development of a concept or a story. And the dynamic of a viewer is also different from someone who goes to see a film. So the theater poster, I think, is more free to even be more poetic. And for me, in graphic design, a concept is more important than only beautiful things. And the last poster I made, so it's this one, Fire Will Become Ashes But Not Now. We organized this photo shoot. And the piece talks about how it is to live in this society with multiple identities. And it's inspired by a book of James Baldwin. And for the design, I focused on its premise. How do we keep our inner flame burning while constantly trying to extinguish fires around us? So I replied with this visual who looks like a Statue of Liberty, and where the methodology of design is just playing with perspective. And the flame of the torch is made out of her hair. And the idea of playing with the hair came because at that time I was reading the book Americana from Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, and it tells the story of a young Nigerian woman who immigrates to the United States to pursue studies of journalism. And she tells us what it is to be in America and how it is to be black in America. And at some point, she tells a little anecdote of her hair and when she has to go to the hair salon. And I remember that it really struck me. So the fire and the hair are very significant elements that tell the questioning on identity. And that way, there was a form of serendipity in finding the idea. And I think that to tell a story with a visual, the base of design is finding the right idea. And therefore, you need to constantly open your mind because anything around you could generate that idea. And once you have that idea, the first thing you do is you make a little drawing of it. And then eventually from that drawing, you try to create something beautiful. So the experience of beauty as a designer often gets quite technical. It's very organized, with a specific utility and a planned harmony. And it's very much a process of researching. And then in the research, of course, I'm looking for things that touch me. And by staying true to yourself, you can develop your own language and your own style. But personally, I like simplicity. But nothing in the style of simplicity is easy or basic. Those are usually the most complicated directions. And the way I experience beauty as a person, it's kind of the opposite, I think. For me, it's all about emotion. And I think I'm a little bit a melancholic person, where beauty can bring me tranquility and consolation. But it can also be something incredibly overwhelming and terrifying, because it can make you feel so small and touch you in the deepest part of your soul. And I think that beauty just is what it is, without any function or without any commercial purpose. And it's free to be irrational or even chaotic, as long as there's a sense of goodness. And all those things I found in art and mostly in nature. So on this note, I would like to end with a quote from Lucebert. Schoonheid treft de mens met het besef een broodkruimel te zijn op de rok van het universum. Thank you.